Somebody said once, what do you do? And I said, I help people be good at drinking. Because, I have no problem saying, I'm so sorry, sir. I really think it's time for you to go home now.
Cheers! What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Hospitality Secrets Podcast. Paul Sfirlea here, and today I wanna surprise you with one more extraordinary surprise guest that I'm invited today. My next surprise guest is I like to call him an hospitality guru. He actually started working in this industry before I was born. He started in 1988. He's working, so he knows the industry. He's not just working in the industry. He worked on many different layers and platforms and jobs around this industry, not just in the bar, also in the bar, but many other dimensions of the hospitality industry, and understands this industry at a much deeper level. And that's why I like to call him a hospitality guru, and I was super happy and excited when he accepted to come to this podcast. One quick thing: if you go to any respectable industry show or convention or gathering of people from the hospitality industry, for sure he must be there. Either he's at the main stage talking, or he's organizing from somewhere. But what impressed me most and actually sticked with me for a long time is one of his famous quotes, which I think it's at the heart of hospitality industry. For sure, it's at the heart of what I'm doing. And the quote is, "No one cares how much you know till they know how much you care." So with this fabulous quote, I would like to introduce Mr. Angus Winchester. Angus, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. Welcome to Hospitality Secrets.
Paul, it's an absolute blast to be here. I'm stuck in quarantine this is day 9 of day 14. So this is quite a relief to have something better to do than stare at my iPad. I suppose I'm just staring at my computer though. But no, talking with someone about a topic that I love. And
it's much better than staying in the hotel. But where are you now for the listeners to know?
I am currently in Singapore, overlooking something. My knowledge of geography in Singapore is terrible, but I can see some green outside and some tall buildings. But I am here for the next great phase of my career, and looking forward to actually getting out of the air conditioning, getting out of the hotel, and getting my hands dirty. So
slowly. So you're in Singapore in a hotel room, quarantine for 9 days. You still have a few days left.
5 days left. But before that, I was in New York for 3 weeks just to pack up my apartment in New York because I've moved here permanently. And before that, the UK. So
you are quite traveling all around the world. I mean, UK, United States, then Singapore. That's a big distance.
I mean, my father was a foreign correspondent for a series of newspapers, and he used to travel so much. I mean, he was regularly away for over 300 days of the year, but he doesn't do it so much. I've taken on the mantle, and until pandemic came along, I would do about 200,000 miles a year.
Whoa, so, that's kind of a lot.
You get a bit blasé about it until you figure out that that's sort of 8 times around the world.
Whoa. 8 times around the world per year. So,
but I always maintain that bartending and hospitality, but bartending, because that's our area of expertise, is a truly global profession, because it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Even in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, there's an American businessman sitting at the bar in a Hilton saying, "Why the hell can't I get a goddamn martini?" And so if you're prepared to travel, and if you're able to travel, that's the best education you'll ever get. And it's a truly global career.
And it opens your perception by traveling and seeing different cultures, different habits around the world.
Oh, very much. I mean, it's because the more you travel, the more you figure out that the way you live your life, like the way you were brought up, you're Romania, you're used to how life is in Romania. And when you suddenly go to Scandinavia or Asia or Australasia, and you suddenly see that there's a totally different way of living, different attitudes, different support from governments, things like that. it really makes you start to look at life and say, okay, it's not just like this. There are so many different ways out there. And people always used to ask me, when am I going to settle down? When am I going to open a bar? I was like, I can't figure out where I want to open a bar. That was always the line anyway. But as I say, it's the world is a great big place, and now it's easy enough to fly and travel, and hell, why not?
Yeah, see the world.
Yeah, very much so.
So still traveling and what you said, you moved to Singapore, but what projects are you working in this period?
Well, I mean, until recently, and for the last couple of years, my plan publicly has been to open a bar in New York. And I had an incredible location, incredible partner, incredible investors. I figured now I finally knew what was really important. So it was all about opening a bar. And there were some construction problems, because there always are. And then COVID came along, and that screwed the whole thing. The construction, the whole project basically imploded. The investors said, we don't know if we want to invest $1 million in a basement bar during COVID, etc. And so I thought, okay, that's fine. These things happen, so I need to look around. So what am I doing at the moment? And I'm still the education director for BCB in Berlin and Sao Paulo. I stepped down from the one in New York because I realized I wasn't going to be in America anymore. And so being the education director for an American show, with America being how it is, was slightly less than. So I'm still an education director. I have a couple of small little projects, but I wanted something big to do. So I was sitting around trying to figure out my next plan. My wife is Asian. She's Malaysian. And although she came with me to America, she's always been happier out here. And I've loved Asia. I've had a Hong Kong-based company for 20 years now. And love the region. And I got a call from a company over here to say, we're thinking about creating an operations director role. Would this be something that you're interested in? And I was like, hell yes, because they're an incredible company. I mean, I suppose I could tell you, because I think we'll announce after this when I'm out of quarantine, but I'm going to be the operations director for the Jigger and Pony group. So
nice.
Jigger and Pony is the #1 bar in Asia, #9 in the world, but they also have a couple of restaurants, including an oyster restaurant, and I love my oysters. And I looked at them initially and I was like, you guys are doing brilliant work. I've known them for some time. I mean, they're brilliant in terms of culture and education and supporting the people who work there. They're obviously great at drinks and bars. I'm not sure how I can help. And then I thought, no, it's precisely because they're so good that they are now looking for people to grow their businesses and to grow their skill set and allow them to focus. And it was indicative of what they do that they were looking to fulfill this position. And I jumped at it. The chance of coming here, which in Singapore, 20 years ago when I first came here, it was okay. Nothing special. It was a lot of expats drinking bottles of Heineken and drinking champagne. And that was about it. And then the Tippling Club came over here. And then you had 28 Hong Kong Street and Manhattan Bar and Operation Dagger and Native and Nutmeg and Clove, and some of the most ambitious bars in the world are going on over in Singapore. So the opportunity to come here, work for some really good people, have a look around, hopefully continue to move the scene along, was irresistible. So here I am, Singapore, operations director for Jigger and Pony Group, hopefully starting Monday.
Woohoo! In a premiere announcing.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to have a photo shoot on Monday type thing so that we can announce it to the world, because there's some interest in what I'm doing. And I'm very proud of it. So, and if it can encourage people to go traveling, it's interesting that somebody was suggesting that maybe pandemic in America, as bars started to close, would actually start that same sort of diaspora of bartenders that happened during Prohibition. That if you can't work in America, you're going to pack up your shakers and you're going to buy a plane ticket and you're going to go. In Prohibition, it was Europe and Cuba. Obviously now, though, Asia's booming. So if I can help lure some more talent out here, I'm more than happy to.
Super nice, super nice. Sounds great. Sounds very exciting. So there are big news.
Yeah,
Angus
very much so.
Moving to Singapore, starting new amazing projects. Super nice. Yeah. Well done. Well done.
Good. Thanks, man.
A quick question. Where can the listeners find your work or connect with you? Which platforms do you use most?
Well, I mean, I'm on Twitter as Angus Winchester. I'm on Instagram as Angus Winchester. I I used to do a lot of writing. I wrote for Class Magazine in the very early days of Class Magazine. Then later on for Flavor Magazine, Australian Bartender, Mixology Magazine. But I just think, I don't know, maybe my writing days are over. But I try and let people know what's going on in my world. But I don't do podcasts. I don't do blogs. I used to send out newsletters and things like that. But there's a lot of noise out there. And I figure if people want to get in touch with me, anguswinchester@gmail.com. I like getting emails. I like responding. I like helping people. So to follow my work, difficult. But through things like this, kind offers from people like you to talk.
Thank you very much for talking.
I like to do it and not so much talk about it. Today being an exception.
You're a doer.
I try and be. Yes, I'm going to say I try and live through actual execution as opposed to just talking about it, because I think sometimes there's a lot of time wasted just talking as opposed to actually doing.
Yes, we need to find the proper balance between talking and doing. Sometimes I'm passing the border on talking more and doing less, but I'm still doing lots of things and still like to keep the talk, because we need also to socialize in our industry. And now everything moved to social media, and as we talked a bit earlier, now it's everybody's sick of Zoom calls, but still we somehow need to do it.
It's also not just Zoom calls. I mean, on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, I mean, you can start conversations. You can't have a proper conversation there. And one of the big problems is that you start a serious conversation on Facebook and people don't read through the whole thread. They just see certain threads and react to those. And all of a sudden you go so off the tangent, or people see one line and they just don't take it in context. So I try and stay away now from serious conversations and serious topics, because you're going to be misunderstood. In this day and age, if you're misunderstood and get the wrong side of public opinion, even unfairly, then, but so it's a tricky one.
It is. So, Angus, I know you started before I was born. I have 30 years old. So, can you share us a bit, like briefly, the backstory? What's your history in the hospitality industry?
Well, I mean, obviously, 33 years in the industry. We don't have long enough to cover most of this. But, I mean, I started bartending. I wanted to be a sportsman. I wanted to be a professional cricketer, which is an English sport. A lot of people don't think it's a real sport. It's lots of drinking tea and ending up in a drawer after 5 days. But that's what I wanted to do. So the easiest way for me to do that was actually go to Oxford University, because on one hand, it's a brilliant university. But in those days, the university played almost in a professional league. So I wanted to do that. But I lived in Oxford, was going to university in Oxford. So I wanted to travel. So I was going to spend a year traveling, working in a department store during the day. And somebody said to me, but dude, if you want to earn some money, you should work at nighttime. I said, well, what the hell can I do at nighttime? And he said, well, I'm working at this nightclub. You should come and work with me. So I started bartending to earn a little bit of money. Luckily, I was then encouraged to go and work in a Mexican restaurant when Mexican restaurants were cool. And now they're cool, but it's taken 30 odd years to get back to there. Later on, I went from Oxford to Brighton and London, then from there to New York, from New York back to the UK. I came back there. I'd been bartending elsewhere. I came back and became a sales rep for Allied Domecq, which is a company that doesn't exist and hasn't existed for 20 odd years, but that's fine. And then one day I was asked to provide some advice about opening a bar in New York for what was then Johnny Walker. Because there was a time when Johnny Walker owned bars around the world, in Thailand. And they had these cool bars. I mean, now, of course, they're doing these sort of visitor centers. Yeah. But in in 96, 97, 98, they were opening bars in Asia. Then massive economic slump, they all closed. But they were interested in opening one in New York. So they knew I'd run a bar in New York. They talked to me and I said, you can't do that. Brands can't work with bars in New York. So they said, okay, that's shit. But actually, we're about to open a head office bar in our brand new head office, and it's going to be a facility for the business. Go there and have a cup of coffee, but it's a bar and we're a drinks company. So we want it to be really good. And what we want to do is we want to hire you to be the bar manager because you know your shit. So I came along and I was the bar manager for the staff bar for what was then UDV, the spirits bit of Diageo. One day somebody came down and said, hey, we've got a bunch of people coming in from around the world for Tanqueray. We'd like you to run a martini masterclass, how to make the perfect Tanqueray martini. I said, yeah, not a problem at all. They came down, I ran a sort of 20-minute session talking about, the 4 questions you ask if somebody orders a martini. Afterwards, they said, that was brilliant. Could you do that for bartenders? I said, hell yeah, of course I could. So I was then employed as a side gig to go and run training for bartenders, set up a thing called the Tanqueray Martini Academy, ran it all over the UK. Then started doing events, set up my first company, the International Playboy Bartenders, which was basically an event and training company. Later on, it was just myself and my partner at the time. Then Ben Reed came to work for us and Alex Turner came to work for us. Later on, Alex Cameling came to work for us. And that was brilliant. But I could see the UK was good, but Asia was where the money was. So I moved over to Asia to set up IPB Asia, fell out with my business partners, quit, set up another company, Alconomics.
Alconomics, brilliant name.
Thought I liked it, but a lot of people don't realize that ALC is actually my initials. I'm Angus Lewis Charles Winchester. So it's ALC-onomics as well as alcohol. So
even better.
Yeah, so I set up Alconomics Asia with Pete Kendall, who was the ex-head bartender from Milk and Honey, and then Sam Jevons, who was the bar trainer from Match Bar Group. And that was all great. And then somebody came along and said, Angus, could you help us recruit a global ambassador for Tanqueray number 10? And I said, yeah, me. No, what? I said, well, I love Tanqueray. I've worked with Tanqueray before. I've run education sessions. Plus, I figured stupidly that this would now mean that I'd be flying business class around the world as opposed to economy around the world. I didn't realize that in those days, Tanqueray had no money at all. And so somebody also pointed out that in those days, a bottle of Tanqueray number 10 was tall, sort of cool looking and filled with lots of gin. And that was sort of how I lived my life. So that was fine. So I became the Tanqueray ambassador, came over to America to do some work. And they said, actually, weirdly, despite you being English, like this worked really well. So would you like to relocate to America? Because 75% of Tanqueray sales are over there. So I spent the last decade over in America doing that. Then about 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that to a certain extent, bartenders knew too much and they didn't know the right stuff. They were far too concerned about the alcohol percentage that the gin was coming off the still and, did the still have rummagers in it? And I was like, maybe guests ask these sort of questions now, but I don't think they do. So I don't know what I want to teach you. But then I realized that I'd been a manager and I was a manager with no training, no education. And the drinks companies were paying for training and competition for bartenders, but owners and managers got nothing, no real support. So started working with a company called Barmetrics. They had developed, and we worked with them to develop a management training program. And so I did that for a couple of years. So, that's a long story. I could talk about trader happiness. I could talk about working for Salvatore Calabrese. I could talk about winning 3 tails plates. But I always say there were 3 things that really stood out. One, when I worked at my Mexican restaurant, it was for an ex-London bar manager in Oxford. So he brought this sort of cool London thing, but we had Maker's Mark on the back bar. Every bar nowadays has Maker's Mark, but in those days, they only brought 1,000 bottles of Maker's Mark a year into the UK. Because it was a tiny, tiny product. And my bar manager, Simon Young, basically said, look, this is someone's life's work. This isn't just a good way of getting drunk. Like, Maker's Mark is so cool because of how they make it, and look at the wax seal and all of this. And it made me realize that alcohol was more than just getting drunk, making members of the opposite sex look more attractive. This was someone's life's work. And they couldn't be there, so you had to be there. Then I moved to Brighton and to London. I did a bit in London, the Atlantic Bar and Grill, which dates me slightly, just after it opened. Down Mexico Way, 5th floor Harvey Nichols, which back in the day were legendary bars. And there it was about professional bartending. I shaved all my hair off because, I had long hair before that and it got in my eyes and that was no good for bartending. And I started wearing insoles in my shoes and climbing socks because I realized that you have to look after your feet and your knees and things. And it was all about cranking out drinks at top speed. Then I moved to New York because my dad lived there and they didn't give a shit where I'd worked in London. All they wanted to know is, rather like a DJ, if I give you a job here on a Tuesday night, how many people are going to come here because you are working on a Tuesday night?
Wow.
It was all about the sort of reputation you had, the crowd you had, like a DJ. And I was serving a guest one night and comes in, he's like, hey, can I have a Johnny Walker Black on the rocks? I was like, yep, sure. He goes, my name's John, by the way. I said, John, I'm Angus. And I realized that they didn't care about your drinks. They didn't care about how many cocktails you knew and the history of drinks. What they cared about is that you remembered their name. That it was about the guest. And that's in New York, that's what people wanted. They wanted to be able to go into a bar where people would be like, hey, John, how are you? Because everyone moves there. They're all trying to be something. So the idea of loving alcohol for more than getting drunk, the idea of being able to produce it and serve it at top speed perfectly every time and still survive at the end of it. And finally, the idea of making people care about what you were doing. Like, those were the three things that really sort of changed my mind about stuff. I also, and again, it's difficult to talk to a youngster, but this was the very early days of the internet. And I stumbled on a website called hotwired.com/cocktails. And this every week had a different cocktail. They would talk about the history of it, the story of it, how to make it. This was things like the monkey gland, 20th century, the Pegu, the red snapper, the Satan's whiskers. And I suddenly realized that cocktails weren't just recipes. Like, they were actually made for somebody, by somebody, and they're developed and they had histories behind them. I read about the mint julep, and suddenly I'm like, fuck, this is mint, sugar, ice, and bourbon. And yet the writing about it, the histories, the variations, the stories. And that was, I think, the most significant thing. You can still buy the book. They turned it into a book by Paul Harrington. It's very expensive if you can find it, but people like myself and Jacob Briers and a few others said this connected us to a global scene in a way that he was in New Zealand. Yes, I was in New York, but it just made me realize that there was a lot more to bartending than just memorizing recipes and things like that. So I would say that was important to me as well. So as always, I have just waffled on an awful lot, but I hope that gives you a slight flavor of where I've come from.
A good taste of the backstory, which is kind of rich and very diverse. But how would you describe this history from the day you started in the hospitality industry till the present moment? How would you describe it in just one sentence? How you would distill this history?
It's an interesting question. I mean, obviously we change. You start off being young, dumb, and full of cum. You think you're sexually attractive and so forget that. But for me, I want to know as much as I possibly can about drinks, drinkers, and those that serve them. So the drinks, people they're serving them to, and the people who are serving them. And I think that's it. I mean, that has been, it's an endless task, but every day, if I can just find out about what motivates people and how you make this and the history of that and how to do it better, that's what I would say. I would like to think that's how you could sum it up in one sentence.
Nice. So knowing more about drinks, the drinkers, and those who serve them.
I wanted to know everything. And of course, that just means you're never going to stop because you can never know everything. I mean, you never learn less, but there's always more to learn.
Indeed, there is always something else to learn. Things are changing, and there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. I mean, new spirits, weirdness. I mean, whenever I used to go to a country, I'd be like, right, let's talk about what's the local spirits. And there's some really interesting ones that I think it was when I came to Romania. I was saying, okay, what brand of this should I buy? And they're like, no, you don't buy a brand. Get a bottle, give it to me. I've got a friend or a grandfather or an uncle who makes it, and stuff like that just blows me away. One of my unicorns is a product called Finkel, Finkel, which I read about, and it was a juniper-based spirit made traditionally illegally in Norway, and it did tend to be. I remember talking to Monica Berg about this, and she was like, she found out that her dad was making spirits, like in his garage. She didn't know for ages, but it's the sort of thing that happened. So, as I say, I have those sort of unicorns. There's always more things to learn, whether it's about posh, which is a sort of corn-based Mexican spirit, or whether it's like Palinka, Slivovitz, or the 8 legally defined different styles of Borovichka in Slovakia. I mean, when you think you know it all, suddenly the world comes along and shows you that
more,
you know
yeah,
nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. The more you know, the more you find out that you need to learn more.
I know, and it's why I love it. You're never going to get bored if accumulation of knowledge, and that could be how to do something better. It's not always just cerebral. It could be about, I love finding ways of separating yolks from eggs. Because as a bartender, you're there and your egg white thing. Somebody showed me that if you get a plastic bottle, put the egg into a bowl, squeeze an empty bottle, you squeeze it, put it just above the egg yolk and let it go. The egg yolk pops into the bottle.
Ooh.
And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Somebody showed me the other day that if you rub your fingers on garlic, like a clove of garlic, you can effectively pick up an egg yolk and move it over there.
No way.
I'm like,
really?
That's so cool. Yeah, so cool.
Wow.
I'm learning constantly. Little life hacks, great big life lessons, but as I say, that's
Constantly
the joy.
learning.
You learn all the time. If you keep your mind open anyway.
Indeed, the beginner's mind. If you keep it the beginner's mind, there is always place to learn more.
Plus, also, just to find this up, remember that, of course, I worked in a Mexican restaurant, and we had 17 bottles of tequila in 1988. So, even now that would be something special.
Yeah.
But we only had one bottle of mezcal. But it didn't matter because we all knew that all tequila is mezcal, but not all mezcal is tequila. Like all cognac is brandy, but not all brandy is cognac. Now, of course, that's totally not true. That mezcal is bottle and bacanora, and there's so many different ways of making it, and ensemble mezcals, and you're like, okay, suddenly from something I thought I knew, it has bloomed into an entire massive new category, which is super cool. So you got to know about it so that you can talk to guests about it. But
you just need to learn.
I love stuff like that.
Just need to have the willing to learn more.
Keep an open mind. Somebody once said it's amazing what you can achieve when you admit what you don't know. I think our industry for so long was built on a sort of bullshit baffles brains. I know more than the guest does, so I can just lie my head off. I always remember, somebody pointing out that all pour spouts on the back bar should be pointing towards Mecca. And I was just like, that's a bit weird, but the sort of stuff that you're told when you're a 20-year-old bartender and you're told by your mentor or teacher, and you believe it. And then you figure out that he didn't know. He was told by somebody else. So
yeah, and you don't understand why you do that. You're just taking the knowledge and just applying it blindly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we know that for sure this industry changed among the years that passed away, among your backstory in the industry since you started this in this job. This job, fundamentally, this industry has never changed. The cocktails, the recipes kind of changed, but not so. The techniques maybe changed, the approaches changed, but something didn't change. And the question is, what didn't change during your years in the hospitality industry? What remained the same?
Interesting. Things have changed radically. I was explaining to someone the other day that there was a time when, for example, chefs, nobody cared who was cooking your food. That wasn't important. The important thing was the maitre d', the guy who ran the dining room. He was the person that was important because he got you the best table. He let you in. So that he was important. Then chefs became important for a long time. People would ask me what I did at parties, and I'd say I'm a bartender. And they're like, wow, that's just fascinating. Oh, I'm sorry, I've just got to go make a call. And I'd be like, no, I get it. I'm a bartender. You think I'm socially broken and awkward and going to sleep with your girlfriend or try anyway. But actually, I said, I'm a really good bartender. I travel the world. I've created cocktails and served famous people, royalty, film stars, all of that. And people used to say, so do you throw the bottles in the air?
Yeah.
And that used to be the thing. It was, flair bartenders is what your general public thought. It's obviously changed now, and people are like, oh, you're a mixologist. And I'm like, no, I'm a bartender. And they're like, oh, mixologists are cool. And you're like, okay, that's fine. And, bartenders have invented all these words to get themselves paid more and laid more. Mixologist, cocktailian, drinksmith, bar chef, intoxicologist, sultan of shake, master. I always like the idea of cocktailologist. And I used to say, somebody gave me a business card that said they were a cocktailologist. And I really hope they're some sort of bartender. Otherwise, the meeting we have planned is going to go vaguely wrong. But recently somebody said, no, a cocktailologist is a proper thing. I said, what is it? He said, somebody makes great drinks, but he's a bit of a dick about it. And it's true that some people think it's all about the drink.
Yeah.
But the idea of being a dick about it, I think one thing that hasn't changed is that, unfortunately, when a lot of people get drunk, they become dicks. They steal stuff off your bar, they hit on people, they get into fights and things like that. And if one thing hasn't changed in our industry, it's the fact that guests can be a bit of a dick sometimes. They don't respect what you do. They think it's not a proper job. Even if they read about mixologists and things like that, they're still like, hey, this drink's not strong enough. Hey, could you put that drink in a manly glass? And you're like, fuck off. You know what I mean? It's just like, the problem is, the hard thing for our industry is if we are good at our job and we serve people lots of drinks, which is not necessarily the same link, then most people start off being lovely, end up being, let's get security, or let's call them a cab because they're just going to embarrass themselves now. And unfortunately, that hasn't changed. I'm interested to see, though, the whole non-alcoholic thing. People more and more, there are now bars that are entirely non-alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And not just in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and places like that, but in New York, because people realize sometimes being in a room of drunk people is not fun. So, maybe that'll change things a little bit, but maybe I'm just being a grumpy old man. But the one thing that hasn't changed is that guests still don't really respect what we do after a couple of drinks, or after one drink too many, shall we say.
After the limit, one more.
Yeah. Absolutely. Somebody said once, what do you do? And I said, I help people be good at drinking. Because, I have no problem saying, I'm so sorry, sir. I really think it's time for you to go home now. And I won't just kick them out of the door. That's the weird thing that, the difference between being a bartender and being truly hospitable is you may see someone's too drunk to serve, whether it's a legal thing or an emotional thing. But to then basically say, right, no, get out, like go and play in the road, is terrible. If you think someone is too drunk that you can't serve them alcohol, then go and find them a taxi. Give $20 to the taxi driver and say, take this person home. And 9 times out of 10, you'll never see the person again because they feel embarrassed. But that one time where they come back in and say, dude, I just want to say thanks because I got home and I realized how drunk I was. I'm so sick the next day. And, I hope I didn't embarrass myself in here, but thanks a lot. Thanks for looking out for me. Like an alcoholic bodyguard. The trick to that is
looking out for others. Yeah.
Well, that's the nature of hospitality. At the end of the day, and it doesn't just have to be serving drinks and fancy food and things like that, but it's wanting to look after the people around you. And
Nice.
you talk about people being hospitable and being good hosts, even if they've never worked in our industry. And it's just because they want the people around them to be happy. And that's very cool.
You kind of reply to the next question, which I like most, which is at the heart of this podcast is being hospitable, finding more about hospitality, applying hospitality more, not just serving drinks, but being hospitable. And the question is, what is hospitality? It's a very vague question, a very general question, and it depends according to the culture, according to the countries. It changes so much, and not just referring to the dictionary definition of hospitality. What is for you hospitality? For Angus Winchester, what is hospitality?
Well, as a general concept, it's very human. It is very human. You are wanting to make the lives of the people around you better. Whether it's the person that you're sitting next to on a train, if I'm sitting there, I have a pack of mints or something and I pull out to have my mint, I'll offer it to the people around me. And some people are like, now in COVID, they'd be like, oh no. But, to sit there with a packet of mint or chewing gum or something like that and have it yourself is just like, that's a bit annoying. The person next to you is like, oh, I really like a mint. So it's a human thing. The thing is that we work in the hospitality industry. And so there you have to be a little bit more precise about it. But I think it's the same anywhere. We talk about service as not being just what you do to people. It's not about serving a drink. It's not about refilling your water glass. It's not about putting some cool coaster down in front of you. Service is about making people feel better about themselves. And it's very simple. I mean, at the end of the day, service is about 4 things. And I've eaten in the best restaurants in the world, in places that are the best restaurant in the world. I've eaten in greasy cafes and hawker stands and things like that. And I can tell you that great service makes me, as a human being, feel 4 emotions that are very human as well. Great service makes me feel welcome. Like, people are glad I'm there. They're glad they met me. They're glad they're sitting next to me, etc. Secondly, comfortable. You know, especially in bars and restaurants, but elsewhere, you know, you go into a swanky shop and you just feel awkward. Like, everything here is too expensive and like it's all too. So you make me feel welcome, make me feel comfortable. I think perhaps the most important thing is you make me feel important. That, you know, great service just makes you feel important. It can be something as simple as, like, you know, you asking for a certain brand and the bartender saying, good choice. Like, a little pat on the back, that little sort of like, oh, well done, nice. You know, you ask somebody, you can have a gin and tonic, would you like a particular gin? Doesn't matter. You're like, Whereas if you say, you know, do you have any Tanqueray? You can be like, yes, I do. You know, good choice, nice, my favorite. And we can commodify that, and that's fine. And the last one is understood. That, you know, we don't want to just be important. We want to be recognized as individuals. So I've been in 5-star, 3-star Michelin restaurants where I felt awkward. The food has been lovely, but it was just slightly awkward. Like, we were there watching an opera and you weren't supposed to be talking. You know, and it's, I remember I went to a bar once with Phil Duff and they were playing jazz and we were talking and they were like, shh, jazz. I was like, dude, this is a bar that's playing jazz. I'm supposed to be drinking, talking, listening. This isn't a symphony hall. I'm not sitting here. And I've been to dive bars, like crazy dive bars on back streets that I can never find again in cities that names I can't pronounce. But they made me feel important. They made me feel welcome. They made me, you know, not because I'm Angus Winchester, international Playboy bartender, but because that's what they did. And of course, you have to employ people who naturally have that sense of hospitality. And I think you had Sean Finter on the phone one time. First time I ever met Sean down in Australia. I'd never heard of him before. A friend of mine, I say a friend, this is someone that we had bounced around on Webtender, which used to be like before Facebook, you know, Webtender and Drink Boy were the 2 greatest resources for any decent bartender around the world. Because there were notice boards and Woody Saunders and Cheryl Charming and Phil Duff and all of these people on it. And that's fine. But I met this guy, Jason. I'm like, hey, we're friends. He's like, you've got to meet my business partner. I met Sean, talked with him for about an hour. And if you talk with Sean, you know that it's just like, ooh. Yeah. But he said, I'll tell you what are you doing tomorrow? Let's come to my house for a barbecue. I'm like, wow, Australians really do barbecues, do they? That's all a bit weird. But when we were driving, he picked me up from the hotel, was driving to his house. He said, I have to stop in and get some beer. So we stopped in at some huge supermarket in Sydney. And he came out with a case of beer. And he said, I think I just hired somebody. I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, I was getting out a case of beer from one of the fridges. And this guy was like stacking shelves. Like, he wasn't manager or anything like that. He was just stacking shelves. And he saw me carrying this case of beer over. And he said to me, I'm sorry if you don't mind me asking, are you going to drink that now or is it for the weekend? And Sean's like, I'm going to drink some of it now. But it's 24 beers. So I'm going to drink some of it now, some for the weekend. The guy said, well, that case is warm because I just saw them stock it up. Let me go and get you a cold case. And he went around and got a cold case. And Sean said, I can teach anybody like how to do the job. But you can't teach them to care about it. And it was that sort of thing. This guy saw me, no reason. He's not making more profit off it. But it was that sense. He was like, that's what I'm looking for. Because I can teach that person to shake a cocktail, take an order, carry a drink or a tray. But I can't teach someone who's really good at carrying a tray to care and to look out for those sort of things. So the problem is that you're taking this lovely human thing of wanting to look after people, and then you're turning it into something that you can make money off. Mm-hmm. But if you do it right, then people don't mind about being charged for this. And as I say, your job is to make people feel better, not drunker, not fatter. But, you know, when they walk out, there. And I remember running a bar in London and having some young bartender who was all like, "You don't give me enough respect." I said, "Dude, you earn respect. You get basic respect as a human being." But I said, "My apple mojito, people are still talking about it. I'm like, I don't give a shit about your apple mojito. I'll tell you what, see that table over there? Go and change that woman's ashtray and make her laugh. Like, if you can do that while I'm watching you, then I'll give you respect." Because that's the bit. At the end of the day, it's not about your apple mojito. It's about, can you make someone laugh when doing something as dull and practical as changing their ashtray? And again, that shows how old I am when you could still smoke in bars in London. But, it's that sort of thing that's important. The drink side of things, I can shave a monkey, stick it behind a bar and teach it how to shake a cocktail. But I can't teach it how to make someone feel good. So that's the key to hospitality. It's not peeking behind the curtain, but I always say to people, you can have training sessions where you say, right, how do people make you feel welcome? Like when people come into your house, what do you do? When you meet people for the first time socially, what do you do? Like, what are the keys to making someone feel welcome, comfortable, important, understood? Let's train that. Let's have workshops about that rather than let's have a session about the mash bill of all the bourbons that we've got, or let's talk about the difference between a Tahona and a Chilean mill in tequila production. And I think that's getting better now. We are doing more training on that, but only because we've taught everything else. But that's the stuff you really look for. It's the hospitality side of things, I think.
You partially responded to an extra question that I have. How can we offer genuine hospitality? One part for sure, it's hiring the right people, those people who care. But how can we explain to people showing genuine hospitality?
I think it's a conversation. The point is, it's not me telling you. It's me saying, when was the last time you went out and had some great service? Or terrible service? And let's talk about it. Like, what did they do? Why did you say, it was great service there? Great. Why? Like, what did they do? It's like, they used my name. I'm like, brilliant. Absolutely. Using your name is simple, but really good. And what else did they do? And the idea of education is no longer an expert standing at the front telling you. It needs to be a conversation. It needs to be a dialogue. It needs to be tell me a time when somebody made you feel good. And let's write these things up. And let's see whether...
from there, yeah.
Yeah. You can't... The hospitality, our industry, there's two types of person. There's a person who's good at it, because it's a great way of earning money. You get to drink a lot, a lot of things like that. And you get people like that. They hate guests, but they realize it's a good job. So they're going to fake it. And some of them are brilliant at faking it. And then there's the person who, they just love people. This is a wonderful job. If they weren't doing this, weirdly, when I'm in Oxford back in the day, and a long time ago, the coolest bar was a bar called Rowell's. And there's still a bar called Rowell's in Oxford, but it's not the same bar. And the bartenders there, Sean and Stanford and things like that, I've seen them recently, and both of them now work in care. They look after old people and look after sick people. They're not doctors, they're not nurses, but, nurses make good hospitality people, because you don't become a nurse for the money or the glamour of it.
Yeah.
I had friends who were nurses, and I used to ask them how their day was. And they would stand there and tell me about how they held the hand of an 83-year-old lady who came in, who'd fallen on her own, and she died. And I'd be like, fuck, how do you do this? I'm never going to ask you how your day went again, because when you actually tell me, but, there are people who want to be nurses. There are people who want to be carers because they want to look after their fellow human being. Mm-hmm. So figure out how to, firstly, identify those people. And secondly, ask them, because they'll teach you as much as you can teach them.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Wow. That's knowledge. I'm still digesting the whole info.
There are... Sorry,
please,
go on.
Please. No, go. I
was going to say the point is that there are tricks that you can use. You can have this deep empathy with people, etc. But, I'm a 51-year-old English, white, heterosexual man. Like, how am I going to, teach somebody else? How am I going to learn from them, etc.? etc. And there are tricks that you can do. You started off by saying, how was I? And I love asking people how they are. When a guest comes into the bar, I'm like, hey, how are you doing today? And they're like, fine, how are you? And that's social politeness. But if you say, I am doing so well, it would be a crime. I'm doing so well, it'd have to be twins. I am doing unbelievably well. People are like, whoa, okay. And that first interaction, if you get someone being like, oh, that's not a typical response, or if he makes them smile, then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit easier. Somebody asks me what a cocktail tastes like, and I say it tastes like angels dancing on your tongue.
Oh, wow.
And people laugh, they giggle, they're like, that's so cheesy. I say, try it in the bar. They do it, and they're like, that is so cool. People ask what's in the drink, and I'll say, it's gin, Cointreau, fresh lemon juice, a little bit of love. Because I put a bit of love into every drink I make. And people are like, but they're smiling, and they're talking to people and things. So, there are little tricks that you can use. But, if you're good at it, people never know that they are a trick and a script. We used to talk about bartending. Hospitality is like being an actor, because you're on stage for a start. I was running a bar in New York once. It got to 4:30 in the morning. We kicked everybody else out. A couple of friends left in the bar. And they said, hey, Angus, can I get a drink? I said, yeah, go and fucking make it yourself. And they walked around the bar, and they stood there, and they went, whoa. I said, what? They said, wow, everyone's like looking at you here. We as bartenders, we're so used to standing behind the bar. And of course, but it is like being on stage, or like being a teacher at the front of the class. And I said, you have to exaggerate your personality, exaggerate your voice and exaggerate your body motions. You're using props, shakers and bottles and things like that. But you can use scripts, lines that make people laugh, make people smile. As long as you don't do it for every guest side by side, then there are hacks that you can do, little tricks and things like that.
Like comedians testing their jokes again and again and again. Then you have the joke that is working, and you test the lines, the scripts.
Absolutely. But of course, you can't live on just one joke. You're going to have 50 jokes. Yeah. So, just be able to sort of say to people, by the way, that's a great shirt. People are like, oh, thank you. And, or maybe like, oh, what are those headphones? Those are great looking headphones. And people talk to you and find something about the person you're standing in front of that you can say, by the way, it's lovely perfume. Not always creepy, but to say something, to sort of say, I see you as a human person. And I recognize something, and that's cool. That's a great T-shirt. Those are great cufflinks, whatever it may be. Wow. It's the little things like that make people go, oh, thank you. And all of a sudden, they're just feeling a little bit better.
Yeah. Still talking about those tricks, those little things, I want to ask, what are your top 3 or 5 strategies about being an absolutely amazing host? I'm sure you have lots of them.
Firstly, try and build rapport. Find something you have in common with this person. Now, as I say, it can be, I'm not going to say a lie, but if they say, a vodka martini, and you say, would you like a particular vodka? And they say, yeah, Yulovka. And you're like, good choice. I like that. You may not like it, but all of a sudden, there's a similarity. So read the guest. Try and figure out, what they like, what they're doing, things like that. Try and find at least one thing in common. As I say, I'm a 51-year-old English white male, etc. But I need to try and find someone in common. I know nothing about American sport, but I know enough to be able to start a conversation with an American. And that's all you got to do as a bartender. Start the conversation. So you're like, you're a football fan, are you? What do you think about Tom Brady? And that's it. All I need to know is that Tom Brady's a football player, and they'll be like, oh, well, you know what I mean? And they're talking. And the art of conversation is getting the other person to talk about things they like. So to start, read the guest, create rapport is always important. Focus 100% on them when you're dealing with them. For the 45 seconds that I'm serving you, you are the most important person in my world. Focus eye contact with you. I'm trying to personalize the experience. I'm not talking to people over my shoulder while I'm serving you. So doing that, something as simple, using their name. Like if you know somebody's name, if you can use it, like, Mr. Winchester, how are you? You're like, I'm good. And it's a little hack, not because I'm famous or important. I mean, I love when I make a restaurant reservation and they'll phone up on the day of my reservation and say, so Mr. Winchester, just checking, table for 2, 8:00 this evening. Can we ask why you're coming? Like, is it a special occasion? And that is done. If you're like, yes, I'm on a date, or it's it's my birthday, or it's a promotion, or it's my mum's birthday. And when they react to that, when they do something to that, when they almost like, we know it's someone's birthday here, etc. So we're going to bring a birthday cake up at the end, or we're going to give you a signed copy of the menu. Little things like that cost nothing, but are worth millions. Also, just be polite and be professional. Because at the end of the day, people like to be served by experts. They like to be served by someone who's professional. Be friendly, but not familiar. Somebody came in last night and got absolutely shit-faced. Don't talk about it when they come in the next night, because you don't know. So Salvatore was always about be friendly, not familiar. And I think that's right.
Be friendly, not familiar.
Friendly, not familiar. But as I say, there are loads of little hacks. But as I say, remember the service thing, make me feel welcome, special, welcome, important, understood, and comfortable. And then try out your material. Figure out what works for you that you can get away with. I'm terrible with names, but I can say sir or madam because I'm English and the accent allows me to get away with a lot of things. But as I say, there's so many I couldn't possibly begin to remember until...
Do you have some hacks with remembering names? I cannot never remember the names, maybe because I'm not very focused on it. Do you develop some hacks about it?
I haven't. I'd love to, because I used to be good. Then I went to America, and literally, in 1993 in New York, for example, no bar in New York in those days had a cocktail menu. Like, you wouldn't tell a New Yorker what to drink. Like, they knew what they wanted to drink, thank you very much. Most of the time, it was shit. It was the era of the early era of the Cosmopolitan, but people forget that you had the Cosmopolitan, the Metropolitan, and the Neapolitan, which were 3 drinks in the same family, all used Absolute, Courant, and lime cordial, and things like that. But people forget about that. But you'd get 50 people a night introducing themselves to you. And after a bit, it burned out the memory bit of my brain. I could remember what they drank. They'd be like, you don't remember me, do you? And I'd be like, yeah, Jack and Coke. They're like, what the fuck?
So this is a trick. If you forget the name, tell them the drink.
Yeah, but we had a discussion on it. What's more important, to remember someone's name or their drink? And some people like the drink, and I'm like, no, name. No, if you can remember their name, hell yes. Like, that is gold. They come in 3 months later, and you're like, oh, how are you? Long time no see. They immediately, you're going to go back there again. I used to joke that I was a great first date bartender, because I could sort of tell if people were first dates, and I would work it so the guy was like, good choice, like, fantastic. By the way, like, it's great to see you again, his drink type thing. And people would come there on their first dates all the time. Slightly worryingly, it's just like, no, you shouldn't be having 30 first dates in a month. But it's little things like that. Read the guest, react to it. But no, I wish my memory was better. People keep talking about writing a book, and I sort of know what I want to write about, but part of it is a memoir, because I don't think people are everyone's writing recipe books nowadays. Nobody's writing memoirs. And I just can't remember long periods of my life, not because I was permanently intoxicated, but just because, your brain can only remember a certain amount of things. And I know far too many song lyrics compared to things, but when I go through pictures, I'm like, I remember that. God, yeah. And suddenly you remember all these things. Back. So yeah, my memory is burned.
Talking about memories, I have like an extra question here. Which is the most memorable hospitality experience that you ever felt as a guest? Because you have to remember something. Which is the most memorable experience of hospitality?
It's on one hand, I remember going to Vida Bar in Zurich because I knew the bar manager, who's weirdly, his name, I've totally blanked on it now, which he's going to hate me for it, but that's fine. But I went there because I knew they had some Red Hook rye, which was a very obscure rye whiskey created by, or bottled and sold by Linnell Smothers. But I went there for that. Great. But then the bar manager, who desperately trying to remember his name, but that's fine. He runs Old Crow now in Zurich still. He comes up and he puts a glass down in front of me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I mean, this like sang hymns going down my throat. It was almost a shame to swallow it. And I drank it. And then I said, what the hell was that? He brought out the bottle. It was a 1964 Bowmore Black. I remember 64 Bowmore Black because I remember reading a story about how it got stolen from a bar in America and they ransomed it back. it was like a malt napping. So I was like, oh my God, 64 Bowmore Black. This is a unicorn in the world of spirits. So I got the bill, and the bill's like 72 Swiss francs. So I leave 500 Swiss francs. I'm like 420 Swiss franc. I mean, that's like 450 euros or something as a tip. But then as I'm walking out, I grab a menu and look at it, and Bowmore Black is 2,500 a shot. So that's that. And that's probably going to get him in trouble now. But when people say, what's the greatest hospitality you've ever had? The first time I ever went over to Japan, I was running a training session and for Tanqueray, the second time ever, for Tanqueray, and I had like a sort of Japanese guy helping me, and his name was Mr. Hoshi. He's a legendary. He's one of the 5 big Japanese bartenders. Cut forward, he now owns 3 different bars. I go and visit him with one of his bars a couple of years ago. We're on the top floor, 8th floor of a building. And he introduces me to his son. And neither of them speak great English, but so it was like, oh, Mr. Hoshi's son. And when we leave, we walk to the elevator. Mr. Hoshi, there's Mr. Hoshi's son standing there, bowing. Thank you very much. Elevator doors close. We go down 8 floors. Door opens. Mr. Hoshi's son standing there, bowing. And I'm like, what the fuck have you got? Did he have twins? I mean, this is weird. I mean, it's not like you don't all look the same to me. So what's going on? And it turns out that he knows exactly how fast he needs to run down the fire escape to get to say goodbye at the top of the elevator, and then run down and be there at the bottom of the elevator when it opens to say a final goodbye to you.
Wow.
And doing this dressed like Eric Lawrence at the American Bar, you know what I mean? It's just like white jackets and things like that. So that, I always say, that was brilliant. I remember going to a bar in San Francisco, ordering a Negroni. It comes with a napkin, and I'd see on the napkin that it's got AW embroidered on the napkin. And I'm like, wow. Turns out Kevin Diedrich, who was the bar manager at the time, he put together a list of like 200 influential people who might come into the bar, and then had napkins done for them. Now, there are other AWs. That's fine. But his bartenders were told, look, these are 200 people. If you ever see these people, give them this cocktail napkin.
That's memorable.
That truly remarkable.
So nice.
Yeah.
What is your secret sauce for being successful in hospitality industry? Do you have any secret sauce, secret recipe?
I don't know. I think to a certain extent, the only thing in life you can control is how hard you work. That's it. I mean, at the end of the day, things happen beyond your control, etc. And the only thing you can control is how hard you work. I also am a big believer in integrity. I think integrity is really important, about being honest, about being the same in your private life as your business life. Also having a sort of a code of ethics and things like that. And I think, work hard, be patient. At the end of the day, it is what it is. There's no secret sauce. I have a lot of people talk about personal branding and how to grow your brand. And I'm like, we grow our brand just by working hard, by caring, by being honest, by being humble, and things like that. It was a different time when we were around, but at the end of the day, this job is hard. And if you work hard, if you study, read books, travel, things like that, then stuff will happen. But that's no secret. I think it's the same in life as with general.
I like to ask these questions because usually all the people are replying like similar things. There is no secret. There is no secret sauce that some have it and some don't have it. So everybody can put the energy, put the work, and do the thing that it needs to be done.
Also, I mean, what is success anyway? I mean, now you have bartender competitions, and it's just like, okay, is this something that you can have as a competition? I mean, yes, pouring accurately and knowledge tests, fine, but how do you decide that Tim Phillips is a better bartender than Charles Joly?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so there's no secret sauce. Successful, somebody once said, the greatest way of showing that you're successful as in the industry is if your bar or restaurant is busy every single night.
Wow.
If people vote with their feet and their money to come there, it's not about how much you're being paid. It's not about how many followers you have on Instagram. It's about none of this. It's just like, if at 5:30 there's a queue outside your door, and there's a queue outside your door till 11:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and things like that. That's when you're successful.
If people are paying you with their money and their time, that's success.
Yeah, I remember somebody telling a story of going to Rum Trader in Berlin. And they went there to see the great Herr Scholl, he's a character. Thank you very much. But this person had never met him before. And he goes in, he's sort of talking to this staff member about drinks, recommendations and things like that. And then like Herr Scholl comes in and walks behind the bar, and the other guy sits down, and he figures out that the guy who was talking to him didn't work there at all. But treated the place as though he worked there. He was trying to make recommendations and suggestions, and it was just like, when your guests start to want to be staff, and of course the legendary one, of course, was employees only. At employees only in New York, most of the bartenders there have tattoos, like the EO logo. They did a pop-up in New Orleans and had a tattoo artist there, and 38 people who don't work in employees only had the employees only tattoo. Wow. And you have to think, when people start having tattoos on their body of your logo, you're doing something right. And that's what success is. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to, if you can help people around you in whatever way, then you help one person a day. It's success in my book. It works for me.
Nice. So, Angus, it's 1 hour it passed. Unfortunately, it flew away. I have just one more question in closing. Sure. This episode is for the listeners. What is your number one takeaway that you really want our listeners to remember from this episode? One thing that should be the most, the one that should stick with them.
I used to say you never learn less, to talk about ongoing. You came out with which I have no idea where I got it from, but nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. But I think one thing is that one of the things nowadays that's one of the problems is everything's so fast nowadays that people need to be patient. Like, be patient with yourself. You can't learn everything, super quick. We used to have people say, but it's different in our day now compared to you, granddads. You can learn all this stuff in books. And at the end of the day, you can't learn about people in books. Like, that takes time. And our industry, I don't think, is sexist. I don't think it's racist. It's definitely ableist. You don't see a lot of disabled people working in bars, but it is ageist that once you get older, people, you don't want to be served by your grandfather, in a cool, trendy bar. You want to be served by a cool, trendy person. And we lose a lot of experience. You spend 30 years serving people. You spend 40 years serving people. Like, that is an incredible resource. But be patient. At the end of the day, be patient with yourself. Be patient with the world. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. You don't need to force it. You don't need to. When I'm hiring bartenders, people come in and they've worked in more bars in 3 years than I worked in 30 years. And they think that's good. And I'm like, no, if every 9 months you leave because you're not learning anything, like, you're missing it. You're learning all the time. And it may not be cool, sexy stuff, etc., but you're practicing it and learning it. So be patient. And remember that service is a noble pursuit. I used to think, when I started off, I thought, service industry, I'm a servant. Yes, sir. No, sir. 3 bags full, sir. Later on, I thought I was serving people, serving drinks, serving food. Then I realized that I was being of service to people. And that changed my mind radically. Suddenly, I have the most incredible job in the world. Like, my job is to make people feel better in a way that very few other jobs are. So, as I say, it is noble, but anyone listening to your podcast, they know this sort of stuff. Wow. So, at the end of the day, be patient.
Dropping the mic. Boom. Woo! Angus Winchester. Woo, 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 woo. Amazing.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you for accepting. Thank you for sharing that much knowledge with me, with the listeners, with everybody. You're far too kind. Thank you very much, Angus Winchester.
I'm just chatting with a friend, mate. Chatting with a friend.
A big pleasure. For the listeners, thank you for listening these precious talks. I hope it was useful for me. For sure it was useful. If you want to listen to this podcast, go to the podcast platforms, to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Casts, and other cast platforms. Or if you want to see, also go to YouTube and subscribe. We are every single week we're trying to talk with different hospitality gurus as we did today. So I hope it was useful. That's it for today. See you next week. Cheers.
Cheers, man.